Hello everyone, welcome to this session on PHP interview questions. Today in this session, we will be going through some of the top interview questions about PHP which can be asked you in your next interview, right? So let's get started. So let's start by discussing what kind of topics or what kind of questions we will be covering in this session. But before we move on guys, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Intellipaat channel and also click on that bell icon to never miss out on any updates from us. So now let's move on to the agenda. So first we'll start off by discussing some generic questions in PHP that you should know, and then move on to discuss what are variables and objects in PHP. After that, we will be talking about time execution functions in PHP, and then move on to discuss types of arrays in PHP. So once we're done with that, guys, we'll move on and talk about session functions in PHP, and then talk about access methods. And finally, we will be talking about some questions in database management using PHP. So guys, these would be the questions that we have lined up for you in this session. And we think these questions would be helpful to you when you sit for your next PHP interview. So without wasting any time, guys, let's move on and start off with some generic questions that you should know while you're preparing for the PHP interview.
So coming to the first question on this compilation of really important questions you have to check out for your PHP interviews, we have the differentiation between static and dynamic websites, which take number one spot. Now, this is a very common question which has been asked, so let's check it out. A static website is a website which does not change irrespective of what the script is initially written and once it's executed. A dynamic website, on the other hand, can change based on the user interactions. It can provide more functionality, and it's not meant to be as informational as a static website, but it's meant to be functional. That's the basic difference between a static website and a dynamic website. Now, if you're talking about the predefinition of content, after being published, there is actually no way to change the content on a static website unless everything is reshuffled and redone from the beginning again. But then when you talk about dynamic websites, the manipulation of content, the changing of content is as simple as going to the backend, changing a small piece of code and just hitting reload on the page, and that's about it. So a static website and a dynamic website, as the name suggests, will have their own niche use cases. One, you'd be considering a static website if you have a user base who wants information, while if you're looking for dynamism and if you're looking for more functionality in your website, a dynamic website is the way to go. And then coming to question number two is pretty common as well. It says, what is PHP mostly used for? PHP is extremely useful in a lot of things. So instead of just mentioning one reason or just stating why PHP is, very famous or what sort, you can always give more than 2 or 3 points, which will definitely increase your visibility to the interviewer as well. So the number one thing when PHP is of the talk is that it will provide you very good restricted access in terms of whatever content has to be put on the website or whatever content can be accessed as well. So this can be done in multiple ways, and it is very advantageous depending on the use cases. Now, when you think about working with a lot of data, of course, database manipulation is required, right? So be it any of the basic operations, addition of data, deletion of data, modification, or any of these operations can be done very easily when you're making use of PHP. And then, of course, when the talk is about a website, there's lots of forms, and form handling is very vital. Now, for that, there is a lot of features that PHP provides to the users, be it file handling, email integration, or whatever it is. So to make these tasks easier for a developer, PHP definitely gets the upper hand as a scripting language. And then the other important thing which is usually sidelined is the system module. The system module will give the user, the developer, basically all of the features that is needed to work on system functions. System functions may be opening, reading, writing, and performing all of these basic operations at the backend, which might seem simple. But then when you have a website which is either dynamic in nature or it is pretty convoluted, the system module and its simplicity in PHP is definitely something to consider as well. So these are some of the most important points of why PHP is actually used for and what is PHP used for as well. And then now when you think about the case sensitivity of PHP, since it's a scripting language, it's pretty common for people to ask if it's a case sensitive language throughout. And the answer is not as simple as it seems. The answer is yes and no. Here is where the catch lies in. So the first thing is, whenever you talk about variables and declaring certain variables in PHP, yes, it is completely case sensitive and you have to be very, very careful. And now when you think about function names instead of variables, the answer is no, it's not case sensitive. The most simple example that you might have seen in case if you have written any basic PHP code is user defined functions, right? So whenever you have defined your own functions in PHP, you can do it either ways. You can define it in uppercase and later refer to it in lowercase, or vice versa, and it would work absolutely fine. So the function would work normally as expected. But then if you try to do this for variables, it will not work. It will be considered as two different variables because variables and their declaration is case sensitive. So make sure you highlight this point. It is very simple to just say yes, it is completely case sensitive, for example variables. But then of course you might be asked a question further saying, there's a part of PHP which is non-case sensitive as well. Can you explain about that? So this answer covers both of that. Now coming to question number 4. Question number 4 states, what is the meaning of PEAR in PHP? So PEAR is basically an acronym which stands for PHP Extension and Application Repository. As the name suggests, it is a repository which hosts all of the components which are considered reusable in PHP. So there's something called reusable PHP concepts, which we'll be checking out in the next couple of questions. But then at this point of time, you should know that this is a repository like a marketplace, like a common place which consists of all of these reusable components, right? So is it only these reusable PHP components that are present in PEAR? Well, the answer is no, because along with all of these, there are certain libraries which will, help you provide a very nice interface through which you can install packages, through which you can work with packages and, develop your application using a scripting language very efficiently as well. So PEAR, even though it has a small footnote in PHP, it sure packs a punch. Now with this, we can come to question number 5. Question number 5 states, how is a PHP script executed? See, now when you think about execution of PHP scripts, it is mostly in the command line interface, right? Or the CLI as it's called. So what the interviewer expects is basically for you to give out the syntax through which you can execute a script using the command line interface. So it's very simple. It's PHP followed by the file name of whatever PHP script you're working on. And of course, the extension, guys. The .php part of it is very, very important and it is needed whenever you're executing a PHP script. And of course, it is a good practice to do so whenever you're working with any command line interface for any sort of scripting languages as well. Now, with that being very straightforward, question number 6 states, what are the types of variables that are present in PHP, right? So, what you should know at this point of time, or what you might have already used, is that there are 8 primary data types in PHP. So, whenever you think about variables and data types in PHP, understand that there are 8 different data types, okay? We have array. Array is basically an ordered collection of data. Then we have boolean. Boolean is basically logical values, zeros or ones, trues or false. Then there's double. Double involves floating point numbers, 5.152 decimal numbers basically. And then you have integers, you have objects. Objects are basically instantiations of a class. Then you have null. Null is also a data type. Yes, we're going to check out null in another question. So make sure to stick around for that. And then we have resources and we have string as well. So resources are these variables which have the capability to hold references to any other resource around it. And then of course we have strings. So strings is nothing but a simple sequence of characters, right? So at this point of time, just make sure you state at least 5 or 6 of these and make sure what they mean as well. So to add value to your answer, make sure you just do not simply state these, but then state the name and then give out a sentence of what it means. This definitely adds a bit of value to your candidature as well. And then coming to question number 7, it states, what are the variable naming rules you should follow in PHP? There could be a question before this which could state, are there any variable rules? And if so, what are they? It's pretty much same as this question. So yes, there are rules and there are 2 main rules which are very important. So whenever you are naming any sort of variable in PHP, know this. The variables have to begin with either underscores or letters. It cannot begin with any sort of special characters, any sort of numbers or anything other than letters or underscores. Let's put it that way. Very straightforward, right? And then yes, the second point states special characters cannot be used, plus, percentage sign, negative sign, ampersand. All of these are special characters which absolutely cannot be used at the start of your variable naming use cases. And of course, they cannot be used in general as well. So make sure you mention these 2 main rules. Now with this, we can come to question number 8. Question number 8 states, what are the main characteristics of a PHP variable? So there are certain characteristics of a PHP variable that you should know at the back of your mind by now. The first thing is that as in any other programming language or in the majority of programming languages, before you can use a variable, you have to declare it. So make sure variables are declared before actually they're being used, and then variable assignment happens. And then of course, when you talk about variable assignment, the equals operator is used, and there is a dollar sign which forms to be the very vital syntax of PHP, which actually denotes that that particular entity is a variable or not. And then if you have assigned multiple values to the same variable, the latest value is always considered. So this is a very important point that people tend to miss whenever they're talking about characteristics of a PHP variable. So make sure to mention that as well. And of course, PHP variables are not intrinsic, and there is no explicit declaration where you have to commit to the variables at the point of declaration as well. So you can declare it and use it later, which is possible. So mentioning the data type, declaring it before using it, having the dollar sign indicate the variable, and the latest value being picked up whenever you assign multiple values to the same variable are some of the very important characteristics that you should mention to the interviewer. Now, coming to the 9th question, as I just mentioned a couple of questions ago, what is null in PHP? We checked out null is actually a data type, right? So null in general means non-existent, but in PHP, it is a data type which will actually show the presence of something. So what is this presence of something that we are hunting for? It's null. It literally means that you cannot have anything else assigned to it now that I've put it out to be empty. And then just like we checked out the case sensitivity of variables, if you're wondering, if null is case sensitive or not case sensitive, no, it is not case sensitive. So you can either have it all in uppercase or all in lowercase whenever you're assigning null to any sort of variable. And both of these statements, as you can see on your screen right now, will work absolutely fine. So with this, we come to the 10th question. 10th question states, how are constants defined in PHP? Constants, as the name suggests, are variables whose values remain the same. Well, now that's an irony, right? A variable whose values are same, so they're not varying anymore. So anyway, how can you define these in PHP? Very simple. Again, as the name suggests, you can define it using something called as a define function. The define function will easily pull out the values of whatever constants are required for you. There are certain constants which are predefined, which are already existing. For example, the value of pi 3.14, etc. is already existent, and you can directly use it instead of again declaring, assigning, and making sure that you go through all of that mess again. And yes, the values of constants cannot be changed after you have defined it. And there is another slight difference where you do not have to use the dollar sign as well. So the PHP syntax, which states that you have to always use a dollar sign before the variables, takes a little bit of a slight turn here, and that you would not require to use this in case if you are making use of constants. Now with this, we come to the 11th question. So as you can see, the 11th question is actually a follow-up of the 10th question. So what is the use of the constant function in PHP? And again, this is a pretty simple and straightforward question. It is used to get the values which are already existing, which are constant, which do not vary. So you might be wondering, when do we actually require a constant function? A constant function is needed when you do not know the name of the variable and you just want to pick up the value. So the example of pi beautifully fits this scenario through which you would know the use of a constant function. Now, there could be another question that's asked, which is, what are the various constants which are actually predefined in PHP? We only checked out the variable constant aspect of it, right? So now we have to understand that there's more to it. So whenever there is talk about constants, there are a couple of constants you have to check out which are widely used. So there's method, there's class, there's function, there's line, and there's file. The method is used to represent the method name, while the class represents the class name as it suggests. Then the function, again as the name suggests, will give you the function name output. Then there's line, which will print the current working line numbers. There's file, which will represent the path and the file name. And as you can see, it is pretty simple to understand as well. So as soon as you look at the name, you will understand and get a better picture of what the output can be expected. So in this way, PHP is actually very much readable and offers good amount of visibility in terms of ease of use and its syntax as well. So with this, we come to question number 13. Question number 13 is again another question which talks about constants, but here it's a little bit different because we're trying to differentiate between variables and constants in PHP. So we've checked out most of these points already, but then let's just quickly walk through this so that we are sure we understand it thoroughly. So variables, as the name suggests, can have paths which can be changed, values which can be changed and whatnot. And of course, in the case of constants, they cannot be changed. So whenever you talk about the scope, the access scope of a variable, it'll always remain to be the default scope because that will be the current scope through which you're accessing the variable from. And then with the constant, it is already existent. So you do not have to follow any of the scoping rules that is actually required to go on to access it and to make use of it. So usage wise, constants are a little bit easier to use. The $sign is very much needed for variables, so while the $sign is not needed for constant, you're going to make use of the define function to basically define and use a constant as well. So when the talk is about variables and constants, so these are the four main important differences. So make sure you mention these, and even though it seems very simple to talk about the differences between variables and constants, make sure you actually put out these points so that the interviewer gets an idea that you have put in some work in understanding variables and constants. Now with this, we come to the 14th question, which states, what does the phrase PHP escape mean? So there is a term called PHP escape. So it's a very simple mechanism in PHP that will actually tell the PHP parser saying that, certain elements and certain segments of code that it's actually going through right now, it's not PHP. So why is a PHP escape required? So in between PHP code snippets, you can have snippets of some other programming language there, which is definitely not PHP native. So in that case, you're trying to tell the parser saying, hey, you know what, escape from executing all of these. These are not PHP. So these are not PHP code. So in this way, you are providing a very, very simple yet effective way of differentiating between a small piece of PHP code and a piece of code which is not from PHP as well. So this way, the parser doesn't end up in errors or warnings, and the program execution doesn't stop. Okay, so the 15th question. It states differentiate between the two very important versions of PHP, that's PHP 4 and PHP 5. Well, as you might have thought about it, there is a slight difference which is of course existent. PHP 5, is definitely better than PHP 4, but then how? So when we talk about this, PHP 4 did not provide any support for making use of static methodologies, while PHP 5 gives you a plethora of options through which you can work with static methods. And then when we talk about abstract classes, PHP 4 doesn't support it, and PHP 5 will support the usage of abstract classes. So whenever you talk about how the method for value access goes by, PHP 4 uses call by value, which is very, very natively different from how call by reference works, which is used in PHP 5. So as the name suggests, you will not be using any sort of address referencing in call by value, but then when you talk about call by reference, the actual address is used to pull the values that are required. So in this way, the very basic difference between PHP 4 and PHP 5 can be seen. And now, when you talk about constructors are very important concepts in PHP. So if they have the same class names, even if you do not have a strict look at the code, you can understand that they are a part of PHP 4, because here class names are present in terms of constructors. They can be same, they can be similar and whatnot. But in terms of PHP 5, it has to have separate names because constructors work a little bit different in PHP 5, and this calls for the occasion to have separate names here. Now with this, we can check out the 16th question, which states, how are two objects compared in PHP? So how can objects be compared, right? So there has to be a couple of operators or one single operator which takes center stage whenever you're talking about comparison. And of course, it's the double equal to operator in PHP. So this is used to compare between two values, one on the left hand side, one on the right hand side, to check for commonalities. It might have common attributes, the value might be the same, or whatever it is, right? So is it only the double equal to operator that is present? No, there's another special operator here, the triple equal to operator, that you have to understand because it is slightly different between the double equal to operator in a way. Here what you're trying to do is you're comparing if both of the objects from on the left hand side and the right hand side in comparison are being referenced to the same class or not. If they're being referenced to the same class, you can use the triple equal to operator, but then if you're talking about different classes, then of course the double equal to operator will serve you just right. So with that, we can come to the 17th question, which states, what is the meaning of break and continue statements? So these are very two important statements which are used a lot in PHP. So whenever there is talk about the break statement, as the name suggests, again, it is an entity in the looping construct that we put in to make sure that, we come out of that loop and then come out of the complete looping construct block to execute whatever code is next. So if there's loop going on, if there has to be something which has to be executed, say 10 times, and you want to come out of it after the 5th to the 6th iteration, you can put in a break statement there, and after the 6th statement, it can completely, come out of the looping construct. Now the continue statement is similar, but then it only skips whatever iteration it is on. So not like before where, we are coming out of the 5th step and the steps 5 to 10 are so the looping statements from 5 to 10 are completely ignored in the case of break. No, that's not going to happen in continue. In continue, what will happen is if you're going to put the continue statement after the 5th iteration, so it is that particular point in loop that gets executed, and again it comes back to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it does not completely exit out of the loop, but it exits out of that current iteration statement, right? So that is the basic difference between the meanings and the working of break and continue statement in PHP. Now with this, we can check out the 18th question. So 18th question is again a very simple question. It's very straightforward, but then it is definitely asked a lot to check if your understanding in PHP is as good as it seems. So the question states, what are some of the popular frameworks in PHP? So there are a lot of frameworks depending on usage. Some are very niche, some are very general. So it is always good to at least mention 3 or 4 frameworks which are very popular in PHP, right? So on your screen, you can see 6 frameworks, which are very popular, and they're known for each of their use cases as well. So there's CodeIgniter, there's Laravel, Cake PHP, there's Zen, there's Falcon, there's E2, and there's a lot more. Of course, if you do know some more frameworks which are not mentioned on this list, you can of course say that. So just to keep it simple, I've mentioned 6 on the screen. Now with this, we can come to the 19th question, which states, what is the use of final class and final method in PHP? So whenever we talk about final, understand that final is a keyword, and whenever the keyword final is used, whenever you're declaring something, it means that this method cannot be overridden by any other classes. So there's operator overloading, there's method overloading, there is method overriding as well. So you have to understand that whenever you call a method or a class to be final and you use the keyword, it means overriding cannot be done anymore from that. So why would you do this? Well, we would do this if we want to purposefully create a class which is immutable, where data cannot be changed and data cannot be overridden from that, right? So as simple as that, final keyword, even though it is very simple, it's extremely helpful whenever we go on to use PHP. But then do make sure you state this other thing as well whenever the talk is about final classes and final methods, is that classes and methods can be used with the final keyword, but then properties cannot be final, right? Because when you think about it, the properties are specific to those particular methods, and if there has been overriding or overloading done on that, these can be carried over. So properties in its literal sense cannot be final. So guys, make sure you specify this too. Now with this, we can come to the 20th question, which states, how does JavaScript interact with PHP? Now understand this. JavaScript is a client-side programming language, while PHP is completely a server-side scripting language, the primary difference, right? So how do these two languages talk now? So what happens is PHP in its native ability has the understanding, has the working to generate JavaScript variables, and JavaScript variables, as you can know, is client-side. It can be very easily executed and worked on using a browser as well. So whenever PHP goes on to create JavaScript variables, and execution of this is easier in the browser, so all you have to do is just pass on these variables to PHP. You can use a very simple URL to do that, and then work with it without much effort as well. So the integration between a client-side programming language and a server-side scripting language can be seen very easily in the case of PHP and JavaScript, only because of the ability that PHP has, that is to create JavaScript variables, guys. So when you look at it while explaining the answer to this question, it is actually as simple, even though it might sound complex initially. But then of course, if you're an advanced learner, there are so many other concepts through which you can state how JavaScript can be used to interact with PHP and vice versa as well. But then to keep it to the simplicity of the novice learners and the intermediate learners, we have stated this. Now with this, let us check out the 21st question. So coming to the 21st question, it states, does PHP interact with HTML? And the answer is, of course, yes, because HTML, PHP and all of these other client and server-side programming languages, scripting languages form to be the foundation through which a functional website can be designed from. So what actually happens is that PHP scripts, again, since they have the ability to create JavaScript objects, they also have the ability to generate HTML modes and move them around very easily. So again, with PHP having this capability of generating the HTML modes and moving around information whenever it's required as easily as possible will add a lot into the arsenal of PHP's capability, as we discussed in the 20th question as well. So the answer is yes, and it's a yes in a big way, because at the end of the day, this is used to bridge a lot of gaps in terms of HTML's usability with PHP, and to bring out the best in both of these languages, one being the server-side scripting language, that is PHP, and the other one being the client-side programming language such as HTML. Now with this, we can come to question number 22, which states, what are the types of arrays that are supported in PHP? Well, there are three main types of arrays which are supported in PHP that you have to mention. It's indexed arrays, it's associative arrays, and it's multidimensional arrays. So indexed arrays, as the name suggests, will always have numerical data. So whenever you have to access the data that are stored in these arrays, or whenever you have to work with any storage methodologies, it is linear. With associative arrays, it is a little different. One, it does not have numerical data, it contains strings whenever you have to check out for indexing aspect of it. And then we have multidimensional arrays. So multidimensional arrays, as the name suggests, multi-dimensional, will have more than one index, will have more than one dimension. So for every dimension that the array is scaled to, there is an index which is used to map and index each of the individual positions, as you might have already known by now. So coming to question number 23, it says, how does the for each loop work in PHP, right? So for each loop is again a very famous, widely used, very effective looping construct statement, and especially in PHP it is used a lot because here it is used to loop around and iterate through the array data type. So working of it is again very simple. So with every single pass of the value, all of these elements that are present inside the looping constructs, they get a value assigned to them. The pointers are incremented for every single pass. So until the end of the array is reached, every single time the values are passed through, the pointers are incremented, and whatever functionality is present in the loop is executed. Is there a complex syntax for each? No. The syntax is very simple, as you can see on your screen. It's for each with the array name as the parameter, and then for whatever functionality you require inside this iterative block is just put inside the code inside the loop part, and then you're done with it. So it's as simple as it states. So coming to question number 24, again we have another differentiate question. This is between two functions, which is the require function and the require once function. So the require function deals with the inclusion and the evaluation of the files that are handled in PHP. But then require once will only include the files whenever you have to work with, in case if they have not been included before. So require function can include and evaluate a lot of files any number of times, even though they have been used and worked through before. Require once, no. It will only include the files which have not been included before. So in terms of efficiency, require once is a little bit efficient. Now when you're talking about preference in terms of usage, the require function is used wherever there are files which have fewer functions in them, and require once is totally opposite to this. It is preferred when there is a lot of functions that have to be executed one after the other, and with its clause of including only these files and functions which have not been used before, it makes it very concise and it brings down the confusion a little bit in terms of working with complex files as well. So this states to be the basic difference between require and require once. Now coming to the different data types that are present in PHP, again this could be a very common yet important question that's asked in your PHP interviews. It can be what are the different data types that are present in PHP. So instead of just mentioning all of the data types as I've told you before and just stating their names, here is another way you can approach this question. Just make sure you put in the type of the data type before. See, we have something called as scalar data types, which are simple data types, and we have compound data types which contain scalar data types in a structured way, and then there's special data types. So boolean, integer, strings, and float all form to be scalar data types. Compound data types are arrays and objects, while special data types, you already checked all of these out. It's null and resources. Resources are again references to other external entities, right? So instead of just stating it all out at once, telling it this way will make sure that the interviewer understands that you have a good amount of clarity on the understanding and the working of data types. With this, we come to question number 26 that states, how can a text be printed using PHP? So this is a very simple but probably the most asked question in a PHP interview. So the answer to it can be very simple. You can just state, I can print a statement using the print statement. Well, you will be asked a follow-up question if you just say that it can be, is there any other way to do it? Well, so to avoid that, to give maximum clarity to your answer, just state that there are two ways to print a statement. One is using the echo command and the other one is using the print statement. The code is very simple. It's very straightforward. As you can see on your screen, PHP echo, and using echo, you're going to print something, and using the print statement, you're going to print another message out as well. So both of these are achieving very simple things on a basic scale. So instead of just mentioning one, it is always an advantage to mention both as well. So make sure you mention echo and print whenever there is talk about text printing. With this, we come to the 27th question that states, is it possible to set infinite execution time in PHP? So let's say you have a coding block, you have a script which has to be executed without stopping. Is it possible to do that? Yes, the answer is yes, because there is one function which is called as set time limit, and if you pass a parameter, an argument of 0 to it, so it means that the execution will never stop and it's in an infinite execution state. So there is this file called php.ini file where it can be also done at the beginning of the script as well. So you can either enter it manually, set time limit to be 0, or you can just execute this in the php.ini file and be done with it. Either way, you're achieving the same thing, which is to make sure that your script does not terminate unless you want to interrupt it and terminate it, of course. So moving on to the next question, it states, what is the use of constructors and destructors in PHP? Constructors and destructors are such fancy names for very simple entities actually. So constructors are nothing but entities, of course, in PHP that will allow you to pass parameters whenever you have a requirement to create a new object, right? So whenever there's an object, there are certain parameters that have to be passed into it. Constructors are used just for this. Whatever it is, it can be initialization of the variable to that particular object or later instantiating it for use. Constructors are put into vital use. Now, destructors are the opposite of this. If constructors are used to allow parameters to be passed in an object, destructors are used to destroy an entire object. So why would you want to destroy an object? One, it can be cross compatibility. Two, it can be memory efficiency, manual garbage collection, and optimizations as well. So you can have constructors and not use destructors and be done with it. But then the provision of these special methods will give you that amount of flexibility in PHP where you can really turn complex operations into very simple operations as well. So this is the basic usage of constructors and destructors in PHP. With this, we come to the 29th question, which states, what are some of the top CMSs that are used in PHP? CMSs are content management systems, and I'm sure you've already used the content management system before, right? So there's a lot of CMS tools out there, and the top ones are WordPress, then there's Drupal, there's Magneto, there's Joomla. So these four form to be the very important, more than important, I think it's popular. It's really, really popular among people who work in CMSs as well. So whenever there's talk about content management systems, make sure to at least mention 3 of these systems which are very vitally used when working with PHP as well. With this, we come to the 30th question, which is a very simple question, again with a very straightforward answer. What are the different types of comments that are present in PHP? There are 2 types of comments that you can add to your piece of code snippet. One is the single line comment, and the second one is the multi-line comment. A single line comment will add only 1 line of comment. Again, as the name suggests, the multi-line comment will add a comment which is spanned across multiple lines. So 31st question is a follow-up to that, which states, can you give an example which will show the implementation of a multi-line comment? Yes. So the syntax slash asterisk and asterisk slash denote how multi-line comments can be used. As you can see on your screen, whatever has been put in the snippet of that comment syntax will be a multi-line comment. So whenever you go on to echo that particular statement, it will state multi-line comment. So this is a new line, multi-line, new line, comment, new line in PHP. So yeah, in terms of readability, I did not put it out great, but then you can see on your screen that every time there is a line break, it is a literal line break in a comment as well. So is this the same syntax you use for single line comments? No. So you're going to use an oblique sign or a hash sign, as it's called, to basically denote the usage of single line comments. So most of the time you'll be using a single line comments. So the interviewers don't tend to ask how you would use a single line comments, and it's the multi-line comment syntax that they're after, and hence this question. So coming to the 32nd question, it states differentiate between an indexed array and an associative array. So we checked out the basic types of arrays that exist in PHP in a previous question. So this could be a follow-up question to that as well. So as we spoke about it, indexed arrays will have numerical indices to whatever data that's present inside it. You can see on your screen that color is a variable where the array associated to it is red, green and blue. The data is string data, of course, but then the index assigned to that is 0, 1 and 2, because PHP indexes everything from 0 and not starting from 1. So that's very important to mention as well. And then associative arrays will have string indices. So it's not 0, 1 and 2 here. You can have any string that you want to. For example, the salary array you see on your screen, where every single name and its associative index is a string element as well. Even though it looks numeric, it is a string array. So even though it looks numeric, as soon as you look at it, the values are considered to be strings. Now with this, we can come to question number 33, which is again another differentiate question, but this one's a very simple one. So it's just what's the difference between ASP.NET and PHP, right? ASP.NET, you have to understand that it's a complete framework which will give you a lot of flexibility, a lot of tools, techniques, functions, and in fact softwares as well, where you can go on to use the entire programming framework at hand. PHP is not a complete framework, it's a scripting language. And then when you talk about ASP.NET, it follows the architecture of compiling the code first and then executing it. So once the code is compiled, if you do any changes and execute it, it will not show the new changes. You'll have to compile the code again to show the new changes. In terms of PHP works on this particular mode, what we call as interpreted, where every single line is changeable as per the runtime, and just a simple refresh will let it work as well. So the difference between the compiler architecture and the interpreter execution can be seen in terms of ASP.NET and PHP. ASP.NET was thoroughly designed and meant for the usage on Windows, while PHP, again being a scripting language, it is completely free of any sort of platforms. You can develop it on whatever platform it is used for, it is being developed in, and where it's meant to be used as well. So in terms of platform independency, PHP is a scripting language which is which is very important, and in fact probably could be one of the very reasons why it's widely used as well. Coming to question number 34, it states what are sessions and cookies in PHP. So sessions are nothing but variables which are stored on the server wherever you're using it in the server-side architecture. And whenever there's talk about sessions, you have to understand that every session will have something called as a unique session ID, and this unique session ID is basically what is used to pick out the values that are stored, that are being manipulated, and eventually that are that are meant to go into that particular server as well. So sessions are these variables that we use to track these. Cookies, on the other hand, are a bit different, because here cookies give the developer and the website the functionality where it has the ability to identify and determine each individual user that visits their website. So it is actually a file that exists whenever the user from the client-side machine connects to the server on the website, where the server actually sends over a file. A server actually sends over a file to the client machine called the cookies file, and this is done to get a lot of useful, legal, valid information from the client whenever there is talk about how the server can be developed, and to get a client's point of view, to understand the client's usage better, a cookies file is always used. So with this, we can come to the next question, which states, is typecasting supported in PHP? What is typecasting? So typecasting is actually temporarily changing the value of one data type into another type. So is it supported? Yes, it is supported in PHP. Is it tough to implement? Absolutely no. It is extremely simple to implement. And the next question that can be asked is, what are the types of typecasting? And the legal valid types of typecasting are put on your screen right now. So whenever there's an integer variable, you can convert it into another integer. Of course, there's no harm in that. Boolean can be casted into boolean, float into double, into real is possible as well, because they only differ in their range of values and not in terms of functionality. Then values can be changed to string, values can be casted into arrays, values can be casted into objects. So when you're trying to do something which is meaningful, yes, you can cast an integer into an integer, it will work. If you try to cast a string into an integer, it will not make sense. For example, if I have ABC, you cannot convert ABC into a direct number, right? Of course, you can think about the ASCII values of it, and then you can eventually get a number, but that's not the point. So ABC does not have any literal numeric usage that can be put forth in PHP, right? So that's the entire point of typecasting. It's limitations in supporting the different types, but then yet it's giving you a lot of functionality to typecast from one type to another. So coming to the next question, it states, can a form be submitted in PHP without making use of a submit button? So whenever a form is filled, whenever a user or a client interacts with the form, at the end of the form there is a submit button which gets pressed, through which the form is actually submitted to the server from the client machine, right? So can it be done without the submit button? The answer is yes, it can be done without making use of a button. So what is the way to do it if you can do it? Well, there's something called as a JavaScript submit function that is used, which will imitate the usage and the implementation of a submit button as well. So again, to remember it in terms of understandability, it's very useful. The function is called as submit function. It is used in the place of the actual submit button. So it can be done, and it can be done very easily as well. Now, with this question number 37 states that, does PHP support variable length argument functions? Well, the answer is yes. PHP does support variable length argument function, and the usage of it is very simple as well. So what we're trying to use is the length of the argument functions that are put in are not constant. You can pass any number of arguments that is required to a function, right? So is the syntax complex? No, the syntax is not complex. All you have to do is you have to add 3 dots before the argument name. For example, we have the function name is add, and there you see 3 little dots that are added before the num variable, right? So this indicates the length of the arguments of this particular function are variable, and it's not constant. So whenever you go on to add and show the output of this particular function, so all we're trying to do is we're trying to add 5, 6, 7, 8 4 numbers. Of course, the output is 26, but then we're not statically passing these 4 individual arguments, right? So we're telling the function that I'm going to pass more than one argument here, and then eventually going to use it for the output as well. So it is very straightforward, and eventually when you think about readability, and when you think about how efficient it is whenever you're writing large programs, this aspect of making use of variable length arguments makes it extremely helpful, and it removes a lot of pain from having to write a lot of lines of code as well. So coming to the next question, again, it's a very simple question. It states, what is the use of session start and session destroy functions? As the name suggests, a session start function is used to start a function, but then what if you already have a function that's already started? Yes, if it's paused, you can of course resume it as well. So it'll start it if it has never been started. If the session is stopped, the session start function can of course restart the function as well. So is the syntax complex? Again, in terms of anything in PHP, there is no complexity in syntax. So session underscore start is all you're gonna need to go on to denote a session session start of the function as well. Session destroy is completely opposite of it, as you might have already known here, because all of the variables, all of the session variables to be specific, will get completely destroyed by using session underscore destroy as well. So session underscore start is for starting it, session underscore destroy is for destroying it. There's a very simple code snippet on your screen which will denote the creation of session variables and the destruction of session variables in the next steps as well. So again, it's very simple and straightforward, but then wherever possible in your interviews, do make sure that you give away very simple code snippets like this and explain what's happening in the code snippet as well. So coming to question number 39 states, how can you open a file in PHP? There will not be a question which says can a file be opened, because it is very simple. It's a basic concept. The answer to that is yes. So how can it be opened is a question which is of importance actually. So as of a lot of things in PHP, there is a function to do this as well. It's called as the fopen or the file open function that's used to do it, and it takes two very simple arguments. So as a function, it has to take in arguments to do something, right? So fopen function takes in two arguments. One is the file name followed by the mode as well. So the syntax to it is very simple. Resource fopen, you have the string file name and the mode through which you can go on to open the file as well. So it can be read mode, it can be write mode, it can be read only mode, write only mode, and many and append mode as well. So when you think about it, mentioning it is very helpful in terms of limited scope of access and workability as well. So using the fopen function does not take a lot of effort in PHP. Now with this we come to the 40th question that states, what are the different types of errors in PHP, or what are the different types of PHP errors? There are three very different types of errors which you have to mention. There is no bargain or limited access in this, guys. So whenever you talk about errors in PHP, make sure you mention these three. It's notice, it's warning, and it's fatal error. A notice is a non-critical error which will not affect functionality, and it is not a thing which is displayed to the user as well. A warning is an error which might or might not affect functionality. This is important. It can either affect functionality or not affect functionality, but the difference between notice and warning is that a display is shown here. The warning is actually shown to the user as well. So with both notice and users, the program can still execute fine depending on how the programming is modeled, but it's not terminated automatically. But that's not the case with the third type of error, that's the fatal error. In case of a fatal error, which is definitely the most critical type of error as the name suggests, because whenever there is an occurrence of a fatal error, the program, the script is immediately terminated. So it cannot execute until you fix that particular error. So these are the three very important distinctions in between the types of errors that exist in PHP. So with this we come to the 41st question. The 41st question states, how can you get the IP address of a client in PHP? Since we're talking about server-side and client-side connection, whenever we go on to use PHP, every single client that gets connected to a server is associated with an internet protocol address. It's called as the IP address. Now, so to understand and easily access the IP address of a client directly, there's actually a syntax that's used. It's underscore server and remote address. So by putting in the address there, it will actually show you the IP addresses of the clients that are connected to the server. So it's again as it is with everything with respect to PHP, it is simple to use but very effective, as you can think about it. Now coming to question number 42, it states, what is the use of $message and $message? So why are there $2 in a variable where $1 is sufficient, right? So as you might have guessed it, yes, both of these are variables, but are there differences? Yes, there are tiny differences. So whenever you use $message, it'll have a fixed name. So the variable's name cannot change. Whenever you use $message, that is a variable where the name is actually stored in a $message. So to give you better readability, check this out. So if there is a variable called message, it consists of ware. What you're trying to say is, so with $message, it's nothing but a variable that $var. So it's as simple as that. The change in the name and the usage denotes the basic difference between $message and $message as well. So one has a fixed name, the other one actually has a variable of a name stored into that particular variable. So with this, we can check out the 43rd question. The 43rd question is another differentiate question. It states differentiate between get and post methods in PHP. So these are two methods that are used for data access or for data access in PHP. So get method, the basic difference you always have to start with is to check if there is any differences in terms of maximum allowable character sequences. In the case of get method, you can at a time only send or get 1024 characters, but then in terms of post, there is actually no restriction in data size. You can get any amount of data at once in a string as well. But then when the talk is about sending and receiving binary data, get does not have the ability to support this. So it does not support sending binary data, while post method, yes, you can send binary data and you can send ASCII data as well. The third point states a query string environment variable is used to access the data that is sent. But then is there another environment variable for post method? No. The HTTP protocol and the HTTP header itself are used directly to push the data and to eventually keep a track of the post data as well. So how is the data accessed? Then we spoke about data access, right? So in the case of get method, there's the get associative array that is used. In case of post method, there's the post associative array that is used in both cases to easily access the sent information. So this forms to be the basic yet very vital difference between these two methods, which are the get method and the post method in PHP. Now, the next question states, what is the use of Lambda functions in PHP? So one thing you have to understand is that Lambda functions are anonymous functions. By anonymous functions, what we mean is that there is no named associations or there is no named arguments which are given to it or any identifiers that are passed to it, hence the name anonymous. So again, why is this used? Basically, it is used to pass arguments and usages from, it is used to pass arguments from one variable to the other, whenever there are more than one methods or whenever there is more than one function being used as well. So now consider a very simple array on your screen. It's 2, 5 and 10, and later we have used the functionality of Lambda function inside the array filter, where we have passed the input variable to it and we have passed a Lambda function there. The Lambda function is the function aspect of it where we're returning the values which are greater than 2. So as soon as you run this particular piece of code, you'll get the output as 5 and 10, and the usage of this is only done to make sure to understand what data is stored into a variable and what data can be used, where you do not have to redefine it, or you do not have to create another variable in another method, or just for the sake of passing to another function as well. So in terms of reducing redundancies in code, Lambda functions really help a lot in PHP, where you're storing your data or moving data around methods and functions as denoted on your screen as well. So that particular syntax is again very simple. You're going to pass an input variable to the function, and then you're going to have the criterion variable, where the criterion variable denotes how it's supposed to filter it for that particular usage of the Lambda function as well. So coming to the 45th question, it states differentiate between compile time exceptions and runtime exceptions in PHP. And as you might have already guessed it, as the name suggests, if there is any exception that we find during compilation, it's called as a compile time exception. And whenever there is an exception that interrupts the running of the script during runtime after compilation, it's called as a runtime exception. So instead of leaving the interviewer hanging with the answer at this point of time, it always adds value to your candidate if you give one or two examples, right? So see, for example, file not found exception is a great example of compile time execution, because while compiling itself, the parser understands that the file does not exist, or the file is not, or whatever you're doing is incorrect during compile time itself. Now for runtime exception, it can be an array where you can always get an out of bound exception where so it's something that cannot be caught while the process of compilation occurs, but then when you're running, you can get this as well. So another example of compile time exception is, of course, division by 0, which is impossible, and the parser can detect it right then and there and display the exception and catch it. So display the exception there as well. So this is the basic difference between a compile time exception and a runtime exception in PHP. Now, coming to question number 46, it states, what is the meaning of type hinting in PHP? So type hinting has a very niche usage in PHP where we use it to define the data type of an argument or any argument where we are passing it through a function basically. So if you have an argument which needs to be passed through a function and you have to define the data type of it explicitly, you are going to make use of type hinting. So whenever the type hinting function is called, PHP will actually run a very quick check to see if all of the data types are specified. If yes, and if it's accurate, then it's all good. But then if the data types are different from what's specified, then there's an exception that gets raised saying, hey, you've said that you'll pass this type of data, but then what I'm trying to match, the data type between the value does not match. So what is this about? So PHP is going to ask you that, and it's going to stop you by showing you an exception. So it's used as a checkpoint to see if all the data and the data types match whenever you want to use. Hence the name type hinting. Where it's trying to hint to understand if everything is used is similar or not. Now, coming to the 47th question, it states, how is a URL connected to PHP? URLs are connected to PHP in a very easy way, in a very simple way, and there's one library that does it better than any other library out there. It's called as curl or CURL as well. So do you have to install this separately? The answer is no, as it comes installed default with the standard package as well. So the term curl actually is an abbreviation. It stands for client-side URL. So the client-side URL is used to make sure that the clients can connect using a URL and to pick up any information that gets displayed on the client side as well. So hence the name as well. So when the URL gets connected to the client, it will allow the users to actually connect to your server URL and to actually pick up information from that server page to display. So this is the basic working of a URL, but then in the case of a client-side URL, it's just an extension of what's already there as well. Now, coming to question number 48, this is a very, very, very important question which is asked, which states, what are the steps that are required? So whenever there has to be a new database created using MySQL and PHP. So there are 4 very important steps that you have to follow whenever you're creating a database in PHP, and especially a MySQL database as well. So the first step is you have to connect and establish a connection to the MySQL server from your PHP script. Once this is done, the second step involves validation of the connection to see if the connection is actually successful or not. If it's successful, then you can write a sample query to see if your PHP script can talk to the MySQL server, and then you can execute a simple SQL query as well. So after you have established connection and verified that everything is working, then you are going to create all the databases that are required as per your requirement and pass them as inputs, store values into it, or later use it whenever that's required as well. So step number 3 is the goal of why you're doing this, and step number 4 is to actually furnish the goal where you're using the queries. So first step is to establish a connection, second step is to validate this connection, third step is to write queries and to make sure that everything is working fine and the logic and the inputs and the outputs are mapped and are working. Step 4 is to make sure you start executing these queries one after another in the order that you have denoted in your PHP script to basically get the task done. As simple and straightforward as that. Now, coming to question number 49, it states, how does string concatenation works, or string concat as we call it in short. So string concatenation is when we are trying to attach more than one element of string one after the other, and in PHP it is done by using the dot operator. So as you can see on your screen, there's a very simple example. There's 2 strings. One says welcome, the other says to Intellipaat. And at the end of it, we're trying to echo both of it, where we're trying to add a blank space in between string 1 and string 2 and concatenate it eventually. So it says welcome to Intellipaat as one single output. If you would not give that blank white space out there, there would be no white space between welcome and to Intellipaat, because we have not given a space either after welcome or before string number 2, which is to Intellipaat. So welcome to Intellipaat with that white space is a pretty simple message that's displayed on your screen. Now, coming to question number 50, this is again a very important aspect. This could be asked right at the start of your interview as well. It states, have you earned any sort of certification that proves that you've put in time into your learning or your implementation process, or how it can help your candidature in this interview as well? So understand this, certifications are a very important aspect in the 21st century. That especially in the world of information technologies, it denotes a lot of things. One, that you've put in a lot of time and effort to understand the concepts, to work with the concepts. Number two, it shows that you have a very strong aspiration to create a career into that, and you want to use that to do something seriously in your career as well. It'll show that you're an effective learner, especially if you're coming from a non-technical background, or if you're coming from a very different background. You could be a Python developer who's very interested in scripting languages using PHP now. So it'll show that you have the capability to jump, skip, hop between multiple different ID concepts, and you can do it well as well. It's not just this, or showing off a certification which states, hey, I have done this. The most important aspect of certifications is when you talk about how you've actually put the learning into use. It can be, you've done your own tiny projects, solved some use cases, solved some problems across, but whatever it is, any sort of certification as a certificate will of course have very good value if you have got it from a reputable organization. But then the most value it will add to your career and life is when you have put something out of it, right? So you've used it as a raw material to develop a product. So at the end of it, if you have any sort of certifications, make sure you list all of them by not just telling out, hey, I have a certification in this. Don't say that. Say what you have done through that particular certification. Explain what all you have learned, what all you are happy with. For example, there could be certain concepts there which came very simple to you, but then there could be certain concepts which you found very hard as well. So make sure you state all of that, how you eventually made all of those hard concepts easy, how the program helped you, what you've been planning to implement in the future as well. Even that forms to be a very important aspect to this particular question. So with this, you have reached the compilation of the 50 most important PHP questions that are asked in interviews across the globe. So with this, I wish you all the very best for your interviews, and I do hope you crack all of them. So good luck, guys. See you on the next one.